Hey guys, Kyle, the Death Knight of Anime here, bringing you my review for Fire Force Season 2, Episode 20, and oh man, what a fucking episode this was. Okay, so just getting right into it, the episode starts off with our heroes entering the Nether, and I like how we see the most pressing thing on Shinra's mind at the time is not if everyone's going to survive without Maki, but more if Arthur's going to be okay on his own. And yeah, in the weirdest of ways, considering what happens in this episode, that is kind of the more pressing question. Because with Maki, we already know how reliable she can be when the chips are down, and she is going to come back. So there's no need to worry there. But immediately after cutting to the next scene of Shinra asking that question, we see the obvious answer to that question. When unrestrained, Arthur's ego goes completely off the rails, and actually this whole first bit was really just the battle of egos. Like on top of Arthur, we also see we also see like from like from Hinewa and Takagi like square off while also like giving Takagi like an early perspective on the Fire Force and Company 8. So yeah, in that sense, it gives us a little perspective on what he's probably going to think when this is all over, and what he's going to think about Maki more or less probably rejoining the Fire Force. Um, Also, one thing I really appreciate about this episode is, as did many others when I read the comments on Crunchyroll, is just how fast things went from 0 to 100 in this episode. Because as we see, the investigation starts off smooth enough, but the moment that small army of Infernal shows up, bodies start dropping like flies, left and right like flies. And one thing I appreciate more now than I did when first reading this happening in the manga is that even though majority of the characters dropping dead are all fodder, and you're not necessarily supposed to feel attached to them, seeing those little glimpses of their life before dying are still meant to show us that these are still humans with their own lives and families, and the families are the ones who are going to be the ones most affected by these deaths. And so even to the fodder characters, it humanizes them quite a bit. And yeah, there was a lot about this, and honestly, as weird as this is gonna sound, there's a lot about this episode that feels like it could have been like the perfect Halloween episode, because there were so much freaky, psychotic, and downright sadistic shit going on that it's like, this was a legitimately frightening episode. Like this is the kind of episode you just kind of look back and like, holy shit, is this shit? Holy shit, things are getting fucking real. Like this is like a freaking this isn't even a mission. This is a freaking massacre at the time. It's it's legitimately a horrifying experience to watch unfold, and I gotta give it props for just the series like going that far with it. Um, and yeah, the episode really showcased that up to this point, the White-Clad have really just been playing with kid gloves, because through the introduction of the Knights of Purple Smoke and Orochi in this episode, the carnage just kept relentlessly hitting the Fire Force. And even when it seemed like they were making a strong comeback, it still showed the paralyzing fear that consumes people when someone that consumes someone is when they consume someone when they're facing down death. But at the same time, it also showed the courage to face that fear head on, as we see through Juggernaut in this episode, working up the result. Who initially was very like when his friend died, he saw his fear consumed him and he didn't know what to do. But when he saw that pretty much that pretty much Tamaki was going to die, he resolved himself to stand his ground, even if he was faced with someone as powerful as Orochi. And in some ways, Orochi really is the perfect opponent for Juggernaut, just from the fact that he's the only one who can take on a relentless amounts of damage, and how the thing he used to protect himself and hide away is now his greatest weapon. And yeah, can we just give this whole episode a giant clap for my man Juggernaut, because he not only stepped up, but he went relentlessly on Orochi. He did not stop until he knew for sure that Orochi was defeated. Like he did not care that how reckless he was being, how dangerous like the techniques he was using. He wanted to make sure he put her down because he recognized she was that powerful and could cause some serious damage to not only the mission but she could legitimately kill a lot of his comrades. So he knew even if it going extreme, he knew he had to take her down. Now, now of all the death that's happened in this episode, it is fair to say Juggernaut isn't going to be permanent because the rule in shonen is unless you see a body, they're probably alive. But even knowing that, he still deserves so much credit for not relenting in this fight. He wanted to make sure his comrades were safe, even if he meant making the ultimate play. Like and again, the Juggernaut's probably survived, but he really did make the ultimate play. He fucking nuked. He fucking nuked Orochi, just the art, the animation in that fight of Orochi versus Juggernaut. That was that was some clean ass shit. Like art and animation generally has been pretty like the art and animation on Production's part has been pretty good all around. But it's like this fight was clean to watch. Like I loved this fight. Just whether it was Orochi's whips or just Juggernaut fucking just throwing everything he's got at Orochi. It was spectacular to watch unfold. And speaking of our animation this week, it was pretty. Again, the art animation was pretty much amazing as per usual. But one part where it really stuck out to me, oddly enough, is when we get to the part that shows Hajiki's thermal vision, and as Juggernaut pointed out, the ability is equivalent to that of a thermal scope. And I feel the way that was translated into the anime was once again much more detailed than how it was presented in the manga, just through the simple change of adding a more detailed infrared backdrop. Because by doing so, it gives the ability much more dimension, which also kind of plays into one thing I think that the anime has been doing generally pretty good on compared to the manga, which is that it's adding little details like this to make the overall experience more engaging. Like, don't get me wrong, there are a lot of times where the manga is superior on a bit of a technical level, like for instance in that in that scene where or the guy was getting like pretty much torn apart by an infernal. That was one area where the manga definitely did slightly better and just had much more detail to it. But at the same time, when it comes to these little details of like adding an extra background or something, that I think is where the anime shines most, because a lot of the times in the manga, like when it comes to Okubo and drawing his backgrounds, he really goes very limited. He's very conservative with how he draws his backgrounds. He goes like a black backdrop or a white backdrop, or just there isn't as much detail he puts into his backgrounds when it comes to the fight scenes or something. But with this is one of those times where he really got into it. And this is one of the times where the anime, it does do better. It creates a bit more of a dimension with its back by adding extra detail to the backgrounds. On the flip side to that, however, the one thing I was not a big fan of in the episode is how they not only heavily censored the graphic nature from Hajiki's death, but overall it felt like the episode largely played it very safe and didn't really get as ambitious as it could have with the camera angles and animation. Like there was a lot of times where it would remain on a single wide shot of a certain scene, when in the manga it was when in the manga counterpart it was much more like it had a bit more of a dimension to it. Like that scene again where Hajiki's face is slashed off. In the manga, that one was much more like that one had a much more like a three-dimensional like overhead kind of look, almost like you were looking at it like from the perspective of Hajiki as he's getting his face cut off. So in that respect, yeah, the anime definitely kind of flubbed it a little bit. But overall everything else was pretty on point. But yeah, guys, that's all I got for this review. If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and list of Crunchyroll. Death Knight of Anime signing off. Later, guys.